There you go.
Welcome to the workshop of the Captiva Erosion Prevention District on this Thursday, February 24th at 1 p.m. This workshop will now come to order. Administrative Director, please read the roll.
Chairman Sylvia.
Here.
Vice Chairman Bill.
Here.
Treasurer Powell. Not here. Commissioner Laird.
Here.
And Commissioner Walter.
Here.
Okay.
Super. So can we go ahead and just do some introductions really quickly?
Okay.
I think Noah, would you like to start with your introduction and then we'll go to Alec next.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for letting me join. My name's Noah Valenstein. I'm the managing partner for Brightwater Strategies, which is a consulting group out of Tallahassee specializing in environmental consulting, former secretary for the Department of Environmental Protection here in Florida, as well as the former chief resiliency officer. I was secretary and resiliency officer for Governor DeSantis, and then also secretary for Governor Scott. And then I now serve, in addition to consulting realm, as a presidential fellow at Florida Gulf Coast University, as well as chair of the Biscayne Bay Commission, and sit on some environmental group boards as a trustee, such as the Nature Conservancy and Bonefish and Tarpon Trust. And I've now have the pleasure of working with South Seas Resort as part of their efforts to make sure with the new ownership group that they have the same presence and effort on the environment that they do have on their other properties. You know, as a ownership group, they take their environmental ethic very seriously. And so I was excited to be retained by them in part to help with efforts on their property, but also they have the approach, I know as Bob would mention, of wanting to see the whole island protected, you know, and to not make an effort on their property and miss the opportunity to work to support the entire island. And we'll talk a little bit more about one of the first steps in that investment that they wanted to make with Alec.
Okay, thank you. Alec, thank you for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you all. So I'm Alec Bogdanoff. I'm the principal and co-founder of Brazaga. We are a engineering consulting firm specifically focused on flooding, sea level rise, and environmental issues. And so my background, I'm a policy trained oceanographer and meteorologist, work in science policy, science communications, and planning, specifically around these issues.
Great. Thank you. And we've also asked two of our Optum engineers, Nicole Sharp and Samantha, to be on the call. Nicole and Samantha, yeah, say hello. Say hello. Okay, great. And then you have some CEPD staff as well. So we're gonna go ahead. I'll turn it back over to you, Chairman.
Thank you. We will now open the floor for public comments. There is a limit of 3 minutes for each citizen. Please remember to state your name for the record. Any public comments?
Very public people. There's David Mitz.
There's nobody with their hands up.
Nope, nobody with their hands up.
All right. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, public comments are now closed. Any questions going forward can be asked via chat in the Zoom meeting window. I'd like to hand it off now to Alec and Bob Walter to discuss.
Let me take a couple seconds and I'll just hand it over to Alec. On Monday, I met with Jennifer and reviewed what we're looking for out at South Seas and Captiva, as well as the Captiva community panel. And you know, Jennifer put out a note on Tuesday. I think it was well written. It was succinct. It's exactly what we're looking for. Noah's introduction is dead on. You know we need to be better at South Seas. You know, I kind of told the panel the 800 gorillas finally woken up and doing the right thing. So Alec and team has been retained. Noah and team has been retained. We honestly believe that through a private and public partnership, we can make a lot happen for the island of Captiva. And I think that's about it. Alec, I'll hand it over to you. You can, oh, I'm sorry, one other thing. We're going to be meeting, or Alec and team and Noah are going to be meeting with a lot of the key players in Sanibel Captiva. The Captiva Community Panel and the CEPD are just 2 of like 10. They're reaching out to SCCF, the commissioners in Sanibel, amongst others. So this is going to be an extensive study, and there's a lot to do. I think we all know that out here, and I think this is going to bring it all full circle. The panel's kind of doing one thing, CPD was going to handle another thing. Now we're going to do this. I think together, and Jennifer and I had a great conversation on Monday. I think together, the 3 of us with Captiva can take this to the next level. So we're really excited about it. Alec, I'll hand it over to you, and welcome.
Thank you, Bob. And Noah, please chime in at any point in time if you'd like. So I'm gonna just walk you all through generally what our scope and what we're doing with South Seas. First, I want to say, we've done a lot of these types of assessments, and for us, this is a pretty neat opportunity to really have significant private investment in what is normally done on the public sector side. And so a big focus of this, again, is not just going to be looking at private assets, but looking at all assets of the island, really understanding that the adaptation that needs to take place is going to be a public-private partnership. And so we were asked to do an island-wide assessment, project development, and adaptation plan. And so South Seas Island Resort retained Brazaga to do this for the full island. And really one of the things, the initial conversations was that they want to make sure that all of the key stakeholders of the island are involved in this process, including the CEPD. That was quite important and very clear from the onset. And so I just want to walk through a little bit of the details of what we're going to be looking at. So some of the initial hazards, obviously we want to develop this as part of the stakeholder engagement process, figure out exactly what we're going to look at. But we know obviously for you all, beach erosion, water quality is important, especially when we're thinking about heavy rainfall and heavier rainfall, high winds being prone to hurricanes, tidal flooding, and storm surge. And just so you all understand, the way we see this is that sea level rise isn't a separate threat, but a threat multiplier. And what that means is we don't look at sea level rise on its own. We look at how it's going to impact all of these things. For example, when sea levels rise and your outfalls are covered, it means that your stormwater system isn't going to operate as readily as it would have with lower tides. And so this is an important thing to consider as you walk through the process. Another important part of this is to really think about vulnerability. So often we see analyses that are just maps, who's flooding where, and those they're exposure maps. It just says, where might it flood? And the problem with that is, this is an example I like to give with a fire station next to a park. Both may have the same exposure. Both might see the same depth of flooding, but it's okay if a park floods occasionally. It's not okay if a fire station floods. And so we not only need to understand the exposure, we need to understand how critical an asset is and how at risk an asset is if it floods. Additionally, we need to understand how easy it is to adapt an asset. Some assets we can make minor modifications to and flood-proof, protect them from hazards, but others may need more significant investment. And so we need to think through that entire process of every asset across the entire island. And so ultimately, we're going to provide, I think I managed to skip a slide, and I apologize for that. So going over the whole assessment really quickly. So first, we're going to start off doing data collection and review of existing plans and reports. You all have some great reports that have already been done for the island. We want to be able to ingest those, figure out how we can supplement, augment the great work that has already been done. We want to really identify all assets and critical asset identification. And this is important because Florida statute now has very specific definitions of what a critical asset is under Florida statute 380093, which is the new Florida Resilient Grant Program. Because ultimately we want to set you all up for success in getting as much money to the island as possible for specific projects to adapt the island. And so we will then do an exposure assessment and a sensitivity analysis. So I've already talked about why we need to do that sensitivity analysis, in addition to why we're also looking at exposure. And then we want to quantitatively rank the risk. So what we're going to do is have a list of all of the assets and look at what's most at risk. That's step one. Step two is actually prioritizing the assets. And you might say, well, why do you need to do this? Well, stakeholder engagement is a really important part of asset prioritization. An example I like to give, obviously it doesn't relate to Captiva, but if you have that lighthouse that, from a risk standpoint, isn't a critical asset, but it's the thing everybody takes a picture at. And everybody's picture has floodwaters in it. And tourism is really important to the community. You may want to figure out how to adapt that asset because that really can build public will, show everyone you're doing the right thing from the get-go. And so we want stakeholder engagement to be a part of that asset prioritization process. There also might be assets that are critical to the whole island that, as a group may decide, this has to be the first thing we focus on. So ultimately from that will help us develop an adaptation plan with a preliminary cost estimate. So this will be a high level cost estimate for different scenarios, looking at protecting the island for the short term, the medium term, and the long term. And then from there, that'll help you all decide what avenues to take and start a conversation about how you start doing projects now, but also how you build a plan for the future. And so ultimately, we'll provide a final report and some implementation strategies. And so those strategies will include the next grant cycle for the state. So again, we'll prioritize at-risk assets and provide some adaptation strategies, both policy and project level for some specific projects. So for those specific projects, we'll have a high-level cost estimate. So we'll actually say this might be a good first project and kind of rank about 5 to 10 projects to initially start the adaptation process. And then again, there'll be immediate next steps. And one of those will be focusing on the next state grant cycle, which is going to be opening really soon. And we want you all to be front in line for the dollars that are coming down. And so for the CEPD, this will be a comprehensive vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan that will be fully compliant with the new state law. There will be no cost to the CEPD, and we hope that it will enhance cooperation and the relationship between South Seas and you all with regards to resilience. Because, I'm an oceanographer by background, and I always tell folks, I don't care how big the hole in the boat is, there's still a hole in the boat. And, we want to make sure that the island is kind of working together as they start adapting to the challenges that are ahead. And so I just wanted to give a brief presentation and go over that and know if you have anything to add, and then we can open it up to a conversation if needed.
Sure. No, I think that was great, Alec. I mean, I guess one thing I would point out is nothing in the report is meant to be binding for the district. This isn't something that's supposed to be a top down. Again, as Alec mentioned, the goal was this was work that we believe needs to be done to make sure the island can qualify for a probably the largest budget we've seen in the environment in the history of Florida, and potentially one of the largest budgets we may ever see for years to come. And wanted to make sure that the groundwork was laid so that whether it was the district or the county or others could move forward and take advantage of some of those grant funds. And that also that as the property made I think stormwater is a great example that Alec touched on, right? Is that one, certainly stormwater through the island, whether it is on South Seas property or on the island as a whole, impacts everyone as they're transiting through the island. But it is also a great example of where investments that are made privately on South Seas property could potentially, if described together, end up being matching funds that would benefit the island as they move forward for public investments on stormwater. So, we believe that as if there were stormwater projects that the island wanted to move forward with the state grant program, either for water quality or resilience, and South Seas was making investments for similar types of stormwater based off of the same plan produced by Prasaga, that theoretically then the either the district or the county or some other public entity could point to those investments as a match in private investment that we think would greatly increase the chances of being successful in drawing down grant funds for the island, which again then benefits everyone.
Okay,
Great. So then we'll open it up for comments from the commissioners. Vice Chairman Bill, would you have any comment?
Yeah, several, sorry. Okay, so my first question is, can you hear me? Am I heard? Wait a minute, am I muted?
We can hear you.
No, I can hear you.
Oh, sorry, okay, yeah. Okay, well, Alec, that was an incredibly articulate report. The first question I have is, can you define what you mean? I know what precisely what a P3 is, a public-private partnership, but could you tell us the benefit of the board? Can you sort of give us a little more detail on how you envision this P3? Like, for example, if South Seas is hiring you and the other gentleman, and you identify certain costs of certain projects, there's many ways that it can be paid for, grants, ad valorem, et cetera. So I'm trying to understand the P3, how you incorporate a P3 into our special district.
No, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. Again, and that's a perfect question. I think that's what I meant to try and capture at the end of my comments, which is, so the example, probably the largest available set of funds for stormwater, wastewater, road improvements, trails, other items for the island right now is the state resiliency grant program. And so those grant applications will be due in early fall of this year. As Alec mentioned, there are some prerequisites to qualify for those grant funds. One is a compliant vulnerability assessment, which, as Alec mentioned, this would be. And so this would take care of one of those prerequisites for Captiva Island so that it could qualify for those funds. And then, so that is one example of a private entity putting in funds that would then unlock public dollars available to the district, right? So if a project—
Question is, South Seas paying for, we already have an inundation study. I know we need this, I know we need the other items checked off. And my question is, are you saying via South Seas that you all are going to put it together? And
Correct.
Yeah. Oh,
South Seas has retained, correct. South Seas has retained Brazaga to do this analysis that we are paying for in the entirety.
How wonderful.
And so that's the first, that would be a first example of the P and the public-private partnership.
Got it. Okay. Well,
There may be other items, and I think y'all have probably discussed other items that you may want to do to then add on to that. And certainly you would be able to then proceed forward with other planning or analyses and other contracts that you might want to do that would add on to that. But this would give you a base to do that. And importantly,
who would receive these grants? Would this go to the CEPD as a special district, or is it going to South Seas to take care of their private property? And I mean, how does it get distributed? Assuming that you people do a great job and are able to receive some of the money that apparently now is just going to agriculture, which hopefully that changes.
So I don't think there are really that many funds for agriculture.
Okay.
But these funds would be for public entities.
Right.
The public grant funds would not be for South Seas private property or improvements. However, the second example of where South Seas would be that strong partner in a public-private partnership, right?
Mm-hmm.
In addition to funding a study that meets one of the prerequisites, on top of that, as South Seas makes investments on its property for certain items, such as investments in stormwater, just as one example, that could be used as, quote, matching funds or identified as a private partner. If, for instance, you say on the public property, so unincorporated Lee County and Captiva, if there was a stormwater project on one of the roads that was identified and you apply for state grant funds through the resiliency program, in that application, you would now point to and say, look, there was a vulnerability analysis and project identification done by Brazaga. One of the things they identified was stormwater, and they saw similar threats both on South Sea's private property as well as the public property. That analysis also had some suggestions about, best in class approaches to stormwater. And here the county is now, or special district or other public entity, applying for funds to address that. And you would mention there already have been private funds to address these problems, but on the South Seas. We believe that could be part of an overall grant package to increase your chances for funds coming to the public property.
So in the case of stormwater runoff, that would most probably be Lee County Department of Transportation, since they have the legacy of taking care of that. So that means that would dovetail with them, and they would be the recipient of the money where it's specified to take care of stormwater, some kind of design to take care of that in Captiva. No, that's great. And then the big major question is basically that with sea level rise, there has to be some kind of architecture design to deal with 1 or 2 feet of rising seas, especially in the Bay. I'm sure you're aware that since 1988, we have successfully risen the front side of the island to the tune of about 13 feet from when it first began. So basically that means if you're standing on the beach now, you are 13 feet higher than 1998 due to the 5 beach renourishment projects. So really our focus outside of storm protection, storm surge, is the rising seas and how it's going to inundate the vegetation and the existing homes 4 or 5 feet. So the reality is that the designs, if the designs are manifested now and we do have some renderings from one organization, that to me, I guess what I'd like, and I know the community would like to hear very much so, what are the plans of your organization to have something of that nature? Because we're also receiving proposals from Aptum, and I want to make sure there's no redundancy here. You're obviously a very amazing firm. I mean, listening to your accolades with the DEP and all that, I mean, you're probably the best there is. But point being is that why don't you tell us about, or maybe give us a little taste of where your the reality of having actual design work to deal with the inundation, because that's like dealing with, I guess, and I'll end it with here. It's like we're dealing with beach renourishment, but first we're going to focus on where the winds come from. Forget it. We need to know how much sand you're going to put on and what's the design. So I'm just asking that question because that's the question I'm going to get asked by the community. So
And I'll take just a brief chance at the property, and then maybe you can give sort of examples of analyses you've done elsewhere. And I think Bob would probably agree with this. One goal is to have open and transparent communication, right? And this will be one part of that. And so that we hope this is just, one conversation of many. I think a couple examples, and, one of the future communications, obviously, when that point's arrived to, when there are final plans and designs of certain items to be able to share with you and show you, that's certainly something we would love to do, is when we have the solution settled for stormwater or coastal protection, et cetera, for the property, is something that, of course, we'd love the rest of the island to learn from. Just a couple examples would be dune restoration and inundation zones in that area, to make sure that natural dune areas have lows in them that serve as inundation areas, which have, in a natural environment, serve as stormwater mechanisms. Certainly, as you're doing any grading or work on the property, finding natural inundation zones that are open green spaces, but in high rain events, can serve to provide increased capacity for stormwater is something that only South Seas is looking at, but also is sort of one of those items that really leading class developments look at. Sarasota is a good example. When you look at their new Esplanade downtown, where they have recreational facilities that now also serve to provide stormwater management, retention for high rainfall, retention when you had storm surge, but that's also providing stormwater quality benefits of capturing excess nutrients, slowing down flow of sedimentation that would enter into the surrounding water bodies. And so those are all the types of natural infrastructure items that in part Brazaga would help us with on the property.
So you're not really going to get into green or whatever you want to call it, construction, whether with natural elements or anything, to build up the Bayside, where there's going to be a 1 or 2 foot sea level rise in this particular cycle.
It was not limited, did not mean my comments in any way, shape, or form limit what South Seas and Timbers would be looking at. You know, obviously, when you look at the other properties they have developed, they've had really an A to Z approach for especially their environmental ethic. But again, as far as the details of each of those actions, those would be for one of the many future conversations we would have.
Okay.
Alec, I don't know if you have sort
Treasurer
of
Pyle,
a general best in class.
Treasurer Pyle for his comments. Treasurer Pyle, would you have any comments?
Not at the present time.
Okay. Commissioner Laird?
I have some questions. This, number one, it sounds like the gift from the heavens falling down on Captiva, or Santa Claus. On the other hand, that I'm concerned over quite a few things, well, a number of things. One is, it feels like to me that South Seas is running this project. This is a Captiva island, and it's not a South Seas island. And so I'm concerned about what the management structure is going to be for this, what the leadership structure would be. How does the CEPD, SCCF, and the panel, how does this all integrate together? If it's all driven from South Seas, what does that mean? So I have those kind of concerns. We've also done quite a bit of work already, as I think you're aware. You'll say you're going to integrate that or whatever. I don't know what that looks like. Obviously, how could I know what it looks like? And there's things like we have an existing proposal for engineering wastewater, not a wastewater. We're doing wastewater, we're doing stormwater runoff. We've got an existing engineering proposal from Kimberly Horn we're looking at for an additional drainage system for the village. We obviously have plans with Apton going forward. So I don't feel comfortable with outsourcing all of this to someone else and the integration of it, because it's our life and our island, which doesn't mean I don't appreciate wonderful companies who have superpowers. Okay, I appreciate them very much. So those are my concerns at this point, and I would like to understand more how Captiva itself, which is composed of different stakeholders and different parties, actually sort of runs this, rather than, if you're going to do it, I think it's wonderful, but rather than South Seas. That's my point of view.
Yeah, and again, let me reiterate at no point would South Seas or Timbers have any desire to be viewed as trying to assert Captiva Island, the erosion control district, the community panel, or certainly the county in any way, shape, or form. This would be for you to be able to use and take benefit as you see fit. And maybe the best example is, you know, when we were talking about projects and again, we think we're probably at a generational opportunity for public funding between the federal funds available and state funds available. None of those projects would be dictated by South Seas or going to South Seas, right? Again, the idea of this would be that it's an investment that South Seas would be making for their property. And by having it go beyond the boundaries of their property in the analysis, you would now be able to qualify for and have our support for project, but they're your projects. There's not a single public project that South Seas would dictate the parameters of, the design of, etc. But with this investment, it unlocks the opportunity for you to be able to go after funding this year, which again, and I think probably in my professional judgment, and I imagine Alex too, is probably one of the best years you will have and easily a generation to go after funding for critical infrastructure projects. But they are your projects. In no way, shape, or form could they be South Seas projects. This simply would be an opportunity for you, hopefully, to be able to more readily go after your vision and your projects. Does that hopefully address some of your concerns? And Alec, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
Well, what I wanted to add, so it's important, we're waiting for the governor to sign House Bill 7053, but that's going to actually specifically allow erosion prevention districts to apply for the state funds directly. So I know that Jennifer was a tremendous advocate for you all in making sure that language was in the new legislation. Second, I would say, I've known Sam and Nicole for a long time, and I have a very good working relationship with Kimley Horn. We are an engineering firm. We work with other engineering firms on a daily basis. We know how to integrate and work with them and make sure that what we're doing works with them. Again, this isn't, it's one island approach, and we understand that. Also, ultimately, whatever data and modeling we do will be able to be utilized by the entire island. So it's the type of thing where if you want to look at things a little differently, you guys could probably do that once we're done with this initial study. But there's really a standard way of doing the analysis because the state statute really lays it out very clearly. So there's not a lot of like, oh, we're gonna, you can't really, you have to do things a certain way.
Yeah, we understand that.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, please.
sure. So I think what the commissioners are saying and what I had anticipated when Commissioner Walter and I met on Monday is that most recently, the community panel had a sea level rise committee in formation for about the last 2.5 years. And then most recently, a few months ago, the sea level rise responsibility and planning was turned over to the CEPD so that we could be the entity that manages it as well as is able to apply for the resiliency funding. So to go back to what Vice Chairman Maville said regarding duplication of efforts, I think and this is what Commissioner Walter and I spoke of on Monday, is how we're going to have to figure out a way and a plan to be able to collaborate and overlap all of these efforts, because we, the CEPD, most recently went to Aptum. The commissioners directed staff to work with Aptum for Aptum to create this plan. So I think if you're okay with it, Chairman, I want to hear from Sam and Nicole, because when I spoke with them about it, we don't want to duplicate efforts, Sam. We want to enhance, right? We want to make sure that what they're doing, we're going to enhance with what you're doing, and it all works together. And believe me, everybody, all these commissioners, everybody is very excited about not having to utilize taxpayer dollars for this type of study. But again, the commissioners, I think where they may be feeling a little bit uneasy is that we don't understand yet what the plan looks like to overlap. So Samantha.
If I may, could I get Commissioner Walter to make a comment if he wishes? And I believe Renee has a follow-up. So, and then we'll have Nicole and Samantha, Dr. Danchuk. But Bob Walty, Commissioner Walter, do you have a comment or so?
I do, thank you. I think it's important. When we first met in South Seas, and we met with Noah, and we talked, and we said, listen, I kind of asked the question. I said, look, I think this is all great, but where do we want to be when it's all done? And it was really important that we all agreed that not just South Seas, but Captiva as a whole is looked at as a best practice model for not only the state of Florida, but with the Southeastern United States on how to address these issues. And there's no way that we can be that model. There's absolutely no way we can be that model if South Seas is in its fiefdom, the CPD or Captiva, parts of Captiva are in their own little fiefdom. You know, we need to, and Jennifer and I spoke about this on Monday, absolutely we need to do this in unison. And I really believe that the larger amounts of money for everyone out there will be available if the state sees us as one as well. I think that's the most important part of this whole thing is that, you know, Linda, to answer your question, there's by no means that anybody at South Seas is trying to tell Captiva what to do and how to do it. All we're saying is, I use the 800-pound gorilla because surely I jest, but you know, for 10 years or whatever the number was, we had an owner that, you know, didn't want to spend that kind of money. Now we have an owner that says, we're going to do the right thing. And we're going to do the right thing. We're going to put our money where our mouth is. And at the same time, we need to have our family and our partners in Captiva do it with us and us with them. And I think that's where we are. I don't think anybody is trying to take over any of this. We just, all of us need to do it together, including Sanibel.
Okay, finally, Commissioner Mobile, I believe you have a follow-up, and then we'll move on.
Yeah,
to,
thank you, Chairman.
And Chuck.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Okay, so a little point of reference or history. It was the founder of South Seas, Al Tenbrook, that did Captiva's first beach renourishment on behalf of South Seas. And that started the whole, then the CEPD getting started. So again, of course, South Seas plays an important part. What I'm trying to ascertain here is I'm hearing that the next low-hanging fruit for the grants is the storm, excuse me, is the oh God, the storm.
Water runoff?
Resiliency?
Thank you, the runoff. I'm not, because I keep poking at the same question. Anyone who's lived on this island for more than a month and understands sea level rise knows that it's about the rear of the island and building it up to deal with inundation. And my question stands, and it still has not, with all due respect, has not been answered. And maybe this is the way to ask the question. Is there no real grant money specificity if we show our plans to start designing a armament of some kind or revetment of some kind for the bay side of the island? That is my question. That is my only question. And I would love a straight answer. Please.
Alec?
If you're asking if there's going to be grant dollars available for the construction of a resilience feature, yes. There's a lot that needs to happen to get there. The assessment is the first step. Then you identify, okay, is this the type of solution that could work here? Then you need to do some coastal modeling. You guys have exceptional coastal engineers that you're working with. And from there, you can say, okay, this is a good solution. We have engineered drawings, and then go to the state and say, this is what we want to do. So there are absolutely.
Are you doing that with South Seas? That was my question before. I'm hearing about the storm runoff, but I just want to know specifically, because we have to guide the other engineering firms. Okay,
Sure.
South Seas is working on this, you're working on that. We don't want redundancy, and I'm just cutting to the quick here.
No, you're fine. We will have specific projects. We will have conceptual adaptation. But again, we want to be able to work with South Seas to develop solutions that work for them and their plans as well. So that's ultimately part of the conversation. We're not going to come in and say, here's the solution to save the entire island right now, but we're going to be able to provide example solutions and work with them and make sure that those make sense. Does that make,
Yeah, no, I mentioned the word renderings before and proposed solutions. I'm just
yes,
asking.
there will be proposed solutions.
Are you going to pursue grants as quickly as you are, again, with the stormwater runoff? I mean, I'm hearing the
Sure.
stormwater runoff.
Grants won't be for us to apply for. They will be for Lee
Right.
County or CEPD to apply for.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, you will show them the recipe for the grant, just like our lobbyists were working on the glitch bill, which was successful.
Should there be grants that the community is interested in moving forward, either the county, your district, the community planning district, that benefit the island and fit within the, again, the environmental and resilience ethos of South Seas and Timbers, that is certainly one of the things that fits within my retainer for South Seas, is to help for what you want.
Well, that's fabulous. I mean, we're already working on that anyway, but to know that we have someone of your stature, and I'm not trying to butter you up. I mean,
You're not, keep going.
Go ahead, I'll knock him down.
Okay, so we have one follow-up from Commissioner Laird, and then we'll turn it over to Dr. Dancher.
Okay, I was wanting a little bit more detailed timeline. So in terms of the vulnerability analysis, when did you think you could get that done?
We are working with South Seas right now to develop the stakeholder engagement side of things, and that will really determine our timeline. Our goal is to have something you all can use for this grant cycle, whether an interim report, which can kind of help you get to the front of the line, or something more complete. But I can't tell you a timeline at this moment. We're still just trying to figure out what the engagement looks like. And that's really going to drive our schedule, because we want to make sure that we engage all of the community stakeholders appropriately throughout this process.
Hey, if I can interject, I
Sure.
just need to be very clear, because some of these questions are maybe, this is something we're just starting. And this is the first meeting of many as this project starts to roll out. We have not been doing this for 3 or 4 months and now decided to bring in the community. We are just starting this.
Okay, good. My understanding, although my memory comes in and out sometimes, my understanding is that we could bring up our existing vulnerability analysis for the entire island of Captiva pretty quickly, if we had the money to do it. Like in the order of weeks or a month, and we'd be done.
By bring it up, you mean compliant with statute?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. We've got world-class companies who did our initial one, and with the partnership with Aptum, and these companies working together, we can zip it along. We've done the identification of assets, including the Indian mounds. We've done we understand our assets, not the detailed ones on South Seas, but we've done that. And yes, your first step was to identify what we have, what the existing reports and data that you have are. But I'm trying to suggest that there's been a lot done already, and I think it can be pushed over the top very quickly, very quickly. Okay, that's what I had to say. I don't have a question, I guess. I'm just.
Bob, you can.
Yeah, we're
I
not
would
looking to
suggest-
reinvent the wheel here, right? If a lot of great work has already been done, that's fantastic. And, Alec and team are.
And I think maybe one of the beneficial things to do in future communication is having Alec, obviously as part of stakeholder outreach, talk with your consultants, figure out, again, one of the number one goals we would have is to be able to make sure that our public partners are able to go after public. And so that conversation between Alec and your consultants to know the gaps there and identify what needs to happen to close those gaps is certainly a key part of this.
Dan, did you say Commissioner Powell wanted to speak? Correct. Commissioner Powell, the floor is yours.
Yes, just as sort of a hypothetical, let's say that South Seas, through their efforts with Alex and whatever, come up with the most fantastic plan in their view, the thing that's going to be the best thing for their business to do to handle the rising sea level. And don't they have to come to the CEPD to get CEP to approve it?
Yeah.
So the idea here is South Seas is doing this out of the, obviously business reasons and whatever, but they are just one of many inputs that CEPD is going to consider for the ultimate project. And I certainly, maybe echoing Renee's question, I just want to make sure that that South Seas knows that in order to do anything that they think makes sense, they have to have the approval of CEPD.
But
Just
that's correct. It's Lee County's choice. I'm sorry, forgive me. Go ahead.
well, no, sorry, Commissioner. I was gonna say there are sort of, again, two sentiments. One is South Seas is retained Brazaga and myself to assist South Seas with their private interests on their property. We do, however, believe that in the investments they are making, that if they make a little bit more of an investment, which they've agreed to expand Alec's retainer, that we will be able to provide you the data and analysis that then you can use for yourself, should you choose to. But that our analysis obviously is wholly for us.
Okay.
And how do you conflict with, for example, Aptiv and the work that they've been doing to help us?
We need to hear from them.
I know.
I think that's for a conversation between Alec and your team that can work that out.
Okay.
And
so
I don't think it's a conflict.
Excuse me. So now we'll turn it over to Dr. Dan Sharp, please.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I don't think there's a conflict. So I first want to clarify what the scope of work that Aptiv is working to build for you. And then I want to just advocate for the importance of having a private partner and how I can see how these two efforts would align. So first of all, you were very clear to us from the beginning that you wanted no redundancy and that you did not want to study. You wanted to move forward towards implementation, and you wanted to have actionable, results that you could move forward with. So that's what we focused on. As you just noted, the first phase was to make sure that you were ready for the September 1st grant cycle for the state grants and for many of the other federal funding opportunities that are available, and be compliant with the state policy. That was a very short scope, as you mentioned, to be addressed very quickly so that we can already move forward with the concepts that were actually developed before last year's grant cycle, right? So getting you up to speed there. The larger scope is more in depth, looking at the adaptation strategies with modeling to get them ready for permitting, ready for moving forward in that process. Make sure they're, kind of the priority projects that can be incorporated into your capital improvement plan in the short and the long term. And then very clearly being able to deliver a compelling story for the funding applications that these projects are the right for these certain issues, and clearly being able to define that for them to make them more attractive to the funding agencies. And so and we can go into more detail there. Those scopes are being delivered to you on Monday. But that's where we are. And that really doesn't align, or it doesn't overlap with what Alec and Noah have described. So as you know, there's been, the county is undergoing its own resilience plan and vulnerability and risk assessment. You've already had a local series of vulnerability assessments that include much of the information that you need for the state application. You have the Army Corps of Engineers has done a vulnerability assessment that includes your area, as well as you've had other federal assessments that provide some level of data. So you have an idea of the threats. what South Seas may not have, they need to go through their own internal processes and come up to speed on what the threats are that are affecting them and make their own capital decisions, right? So, it may be an important question today to understand what level of investment are they making within their property over the next 10 years so that they are becoming more resilient on site. They will need to know what are the greatest threats across the community in accessing their site or in getting supplies to their site or in the long-term sustainability of their site. And so, the way I would frame it is if they're looking at the island-wide vulnerabilities, it's with respect for what's, going to affect the sustainability of their investments and their property. And that's very important to understand. And the way you can build that partnership together is that you both have a vested interest. And so they need to go through this process. It's important for them to do the outreach as they're doing today so that they can find out what your interests are, what you've already making an investment in, because it's obvious, right? It seems like today, Alec wasn't aware that we were already coming forward with this work. So you needed to have this conversation. And that's what he's going to do with all the other partners as well. So I hope that there really isn't a conflict at all with the work. You have a long-term program that you're ready to make continued investments in, and you already have a history that you're building upon. And so you kind of know where you're at, where you're moving forward to next. South Seas needs to do their own work to get to the level of where you are and then be able to contribute to the conversation. And it's a gift to be able to have, advocates like Noah in your corner to deliver the letter of support for each application. The fact that they're saying that on the phone today is a very, very good thing. We're not going to need just one letter of support. We're going to need multiple letter of supports from all of the partners. So that's part of the process. To have that already kind of set today is a very good thing. And, I would be careful in saying that, private funds that are spent on private property will likely not be considered match, but it is an important part of the story. And overall, that's the goal. We want the entire island, the entire community, the county, the state, everybody to be resilient together and to share best practices. And so, as Alec mentioned, we've known each other for a long time now. We are happy to work with, all of the partners, across the island and make this the best project. But I really do not see conflict. We're very detailed in the way that we avoid redundancy. I have no interest in doing anything that someone's already done. So
Let me ask, Nicole, did you want to make a comment?
I think Sam summed it up pretty much. I think, we are very open to collaborating with South Seas on the vulnerability assessment. I think that's something that maybe we can discuss further with both the CEPD commissioners and CEPD admin to see if that's something they're interested in. But as Sam said, we have collaborated with Brazaga and his partners before, and, Integral did a great study, putting the first step out there and, taking on those efforts and just getting the vulnerability assessment done, I think is the key portion of work to get you guys the funds. And, we're willing to be open to collaborate with, all parties just to get you that study done and as quick as possible so you're eligible for grant funding.
Okay, so could I ask Vice Chair Lavelle, would you have any follow-up?
Yeah, a couple of questions. First of all, Samantha, that was absolutely brilliant. I'm sorry with all the niceties, but I mean that. That was just so beautifully said.
I'm happy to serve you. Thank you.
Vice Chair Lavelle, would you have any more accurate comments?
Yes, very important. Where is Carrie Schumann in this call? Why isn't she not part of this? We paid $75,000. I mean, I'm just saying, this is not a criticism, but I want to know why she's not part of this call. This is a very important aspect. Does she even know this, that this is a workshop?
She was aware, yes.
I see. How was she aware?
I spoke to her the other day.
Oh, okay. No, because it's not on the website. People were calling me and I guess it got rectified.
We
So
fixed it.
that's a Monday conversation, why these things aren't on the, but that's fine. We can talk about that Monday. I'm just curious. That's something, maybe Commissioner Pyle, we need to talk about as far as her role, because we want to take advantage of all our players. And you know, we need major focus on grant funding. We also have a team of lobbyists that were successful in, you know, getting the glitch bill done. Okay, but what's the next move? I want to hear it. Let's talk. Let's go. I mean, we can talk about, you know, teamwork and all that, but I want to know what the next move is, because these are the things on Monday that we need to discuss. And that is my final word.
Treasurer Pyle, would you like any follow-up comments?
Yes, I was a little surprised that Carrie was not on this call. And I guess I would ask Sam and Nicole, did anybody invite her and say, you know, we're planning to work with you, and if you should be at this meeting, or this is the worry that I have, is that people are going to go in different directions and not take advantage of work that we've already done. But why isn't she on the call?
Okay, well, we will figure that out. Commissioner Laird, any follow-up?
Yes, when we were talking about projects that, Noah, you were saying, I believe that there may be separate projects that CEDD would be wanting grants for. Are we all envisioning that your firm would help obtain those grants? I wasn't clear about it. Because if what we're doing is doing this study to get our vulnerability assessment all done so that we can apply for the grants, I don't understand your role once we've done that. Are you for the CAPs? I don't understand.
So I won't talk to a specific project since we don't have a specific project before us. But in general, I believe one of the most important messages is that South Seas believes that not only will the work of Brazaga prepare its own property, but that it will be of benefit to the work you're doing in addition for the island, and that we would like to see the island as a whole be as successful as possible, bringing in state grant funds for projects to make the island more resilient. That benefits us all. And to that end, certainly part of my retainer and work with South Seas would be to help ensure the county and districts such as yourself is successful. Now, I won't speak to a specific project that's not before us, but yes, that is the general idea, is that if there are projects that are a natural outgrowth of the work that we collaboratively do together in analyzing vulnerabilities, envisioning what the island should look like in the future, I am here as an asset to help make sure that happens.
So Commissioner, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So let's just assume the
So the very short answer without the caveats is yes.
Okay, so I'm going to do an example that's a funny example. So let's assume that the South Seas Road, which will go underwater, already is frequently, wasn't in South Seas. And so we decided as a community that our highest project was we needed to get that road up, but it wasn't owned by South Seas. So
right.
Okay, so then you feel it as part of your retainer that you would go advocate for the funding of the raising of that road and putting in whatever levies we need and what all of that stuff, right? Did I get it right?
I think that's a great example. So in that example, I would imagine that, can I further your example a little bit to say that it is under the ownership of your district, right? And so in that example, I would expect Jennifer or yourself or someone from the district to mention that you would like to and have identified that as a key asset. I have to imagine that South Seas would agree. And if you said we were moving forward with this grant application or even a member project, a special appropriation for it, that I would fully envision South Seas to say, Noah, please go and do all that you can to be helpful in ensuring that happens. And for me, that would involve, working to find third-party validators and stakeholders to write letters of support. That would involve me lobbying, obviously not on behalf of you, but on behalf of South Seas, expressing that that is a critical project that should be funded. So
Okay.
is that clear?
Yes, I was just sort of confirming my understanding.
Yep.
And then one, see, I keep forgetting these things. One more question was, I don't remember. Sorry.
Commissioner Walter, you have the last comment.
I'm fine. I think I've said enough.
Okay, the one thing I would say to the staff, if they can follow up with the attorney to answer Dick Pyle's question with respect to, is it when they do something, the hypothetical, will they have to come to CEPD to get approval? I think we have to get a legal opinion on that.
Just to, okay, wait, just to clarify that quickly. So what you're saying, Commissioner Pyle, is you want, they have to have permission. I would think, and Noah and Alec back me up. Yeah, I would think that, that the only thing you would need in terms, you're doing this as a private entity for South Seas, right? Okay, so yes, then the answer to that question would be no, because they're private, they can do whatever they want.
But we would be doing the grant.
But the money piece is a different piece, right? Yes.
Do we
Okay.
have this clear then?
Yes. Are you clear on that, Commissioner Pyle? Does that make sense?
You're saying because they're a private entity, if they want to do something, they can go ahead and do it, but they probably couldn't do it without, they probably couldn't use any of our money for it if we don't approve it.
Well, the
Correct.
thing is, yes, that's correct. Yes.
Do we have to get, but there's other approvals for anything they do on the island? Is that's, I think is,
That all involves permitting, and I don't believe I think that would be Afton's role probably
I don't know.
to
Let's
pull
say-
those permits and do that.
Chairman Sylvia, can I give the perfect analogy to sort of encapsulate the question?
Yeah, oh, yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So if you want to build a dock, you don't go to CEPD to build a dock.
Correct.
If South Seas wants to do their entire property and fortify, again, the bayside for inundation, they don't need our permission. They would need our permission if they wanted to put extra sand on the beach. But I think they've done that before when they built the groin. And I don't know if it was an interlocal agreement or something of that nature. So our jurisdiction is currently the beach, and also our jurisdiction is the task of apportioning the costs of the resiliency of the bayside in a public domain. So the answer is not really. We can't tell if South Seas wants to do something, if they want to build it 3 feet higher, and we as a community on the CEPD portion want to do 2 feet high, then that's their prerogative, I think. But, and I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Excellent. Dick, Mr. Pyle, you all set then with the question?
Yeah, and that would be something that would bother me, that South Seas would go ahead and do something that we didn't approve of.
Well, it's my understanding that this whole project's going to be a collaborative effort. From my conversation with Commissioner Walter on Monday, he said that maybe to even answer the SCCF question, and possibly they were going to meet with all the stakeholders. So that would be SCCF, that would be City of Sanibel, CEPD, Community Panel. So I think that that's going to be covered. So I think in terms of next steps, that's probably, once they're putting their plan in place.
I don't think so.
Commissioner,
No,
Commissioner
one
Pyle.
final comment.
Hold
Just,
on. No, Noah, can you let him speak for a second?
okay, Noah, go ahead.
thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, Commissioner Pyle, I think they're sort of two different things. One is for our planning process, certainly we want to be inclusive when we're planning and providing data that the island could use. And I think your consultant was sort of clear on the benefits of that. for any projects, again, those are your projects. That's not something, I mean, that not only do you get to approve those, you're the ones who would originate and decide to move forward with it. And those are wholly under, really, the question is, you know, if you would like, I would view it as you now have a free lobby team to go with it to make the island successful at that. Now, should you not want me to advocate for a project, certainly I think we would respect that, but really it's for the projects that you would like to proceed forward with. I hope you would consider letting us assist to make sure the island's successful in securing this.
So
No, wait,
again,
excuse me, Noah, what the concern is with Mr. Pyle, I think, is that he's afraid that if, which would never happen, but you people decide to make 6-foot cement walls and to hell with mangroves and all that, on the South Sea side, do we have any control over that? I think it's just like worst case scenario concept.
Huh.
So the answer is, well, good luck getting that done because it would fly against everything. So if the concern is, would there be something drawn up that would be the antithesis of what we hope to accomplish? And do we have any control over that? And the answer is technically no, but realistically yes, as has been the history of the island.
Do we really know that for sure? Because let's say, for example, the South Seas want, because we are the CEPD and it is our whatever to protect, right? And let's say South Seas did want to put a 6-foot wall along the dunes, for example, which is totally ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It'll never happen, but go ahead. Yeah, I see your point.
Okay, and I don't think, no, I never, and I think Commissioner Pyle was asking, could we say no to that? We, the CEPD. And so I think this is actually a legal question as to what the, what is our charge by the state in terms of our responsibilities and our ability to approve of projects. Recognize that on the Bay side, most of the projects are going to be on private land. There's individual property owners.
That's right. Yeah. That's
We're going to have to put fill along the backside. Those are going to be on private lands. And I don't know how this is all going to work out. I don't know how.
So that's the issue with Mr. Pyle or Commissioner Pyle is negated because most of the Bayside is privately owned except for a few areas. And I can't imagine the absurdity of doing that. Noah, help me out. I'm trying to help you out to explain it.
I love worst case scenarioing, but the problem with that is you can never dismiss every possible scenario that you could come up with. I hope that the fact that you have South Seas and Timbers and the new ownership group immediately investing in a resilience study with Brazaga and Alec and his partners, as well as myself and the whole team at Brightwater Strategies Group, and that we're expressing the interest to be open and transparent and collaborative with not only yourself, but the rest of the island, and that we're offering up the services of Brightwater Strategies Group, so which involves myself, as well as the former chief of staff of the Department of Environmental Protection, as well as 2 other attorneys, gives you an idea as to the corporate stewards and partners you have, right? And I would expect that level of
my
commitment.
suggestion at this point is that we turn this question over to our attorney and have him review and come back to us as a commission and clarify exactly what this position is. I know, again, these are great discussions and good points, but I think we need to clarify exactly what that responsibility is.
And I, for one, even though I'm the one who keeps coming up with these scenarios, I have no doubts about your intentions, okay?
Yeah.
It's just understanding sort of underlying ground rules, that's all, and who's really responsible, trying to clarify it.
Right,
So
we would certainly respect any and all legal authority that the district has, right? I mean, I think if you look at the team of consultants that South Seas has, from their environmental consultants to their permanent consultants, we would fully respect all legal authority and the permitting structure, both for the state, for the water management district, to the district, to the county, and look so forward to doing so in a very transparent manner. So.
Okay, thank
Can I just add that we are a licensed civil and coastal engineering firm in the state of Florida. So, we do permitting all the time. We're not going to, we have to follow laws and regulation.
I have one more question.
Go ahead, last question.
Last question.
Yes.
Question equals last. Okay, on outreach. What you're talking about are outreaching to the stakeholders, which are sort of the major groups of stakeholders, if you will, and their representatives. As I read the FDE process for adaptation, we're also talk a lot about outreach to the citizens of the community. And so it's sort of like there's two different levels of that. What do you think about outreach to the community, meaning the real Joe citizen who's going to have this in their backyard?
So I will start with the first part of any project we do is creating a stakeholder engagement plan. We have just started this project, so we have not gone through that phase of the project with South Seas yet. That will be something we do with them. My background is science communications. This is the stuff I love doing. So as we develop that plan, I think we can certainly talk with Jennifer and you all and make sure that that is a stakeholder engagement plan that, really works for South Seas and, includes your feedback.
And I will, I will have comments on this on Monday. So the commissioner's comments are now closed. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motioned.
Is there a
Second. I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Any
So,
opposed?
Aye.
Absolutely not.
thank
You
you.
guys
Call this
sound
workshop
great.
adjourned.
Sounds great. I love it.